just in terms of sharing what the coalition and Lebone's relationship is, and what we've learned, just to say that the summit, yeah, it's been a real privilege for us to be able to have everyone here, John. And so I think a reminder of young energy and young teachers and what they are aspiring to is encouraging for all of us who are involved in teaching. And the writing of the news story is also an interesting concept, because ultimately, as I mentioned yesterday, that's kind of what Lebone was created as. And the great thing is I was sharing with our staff recently, is that we were the news story, but there are many news stories that have come since then. And it's quite an interesting thing as to how you consolidate your news story but continue to write the news story. And I think certainly some ideas that have come out in the last couple of days about how one could go about that process of doing that. So thank you for the sharing. So a little bit then, just, I mean, I don't want to go into too much about the school. We have obviously had the privilege of learning much in working closely with the coalition, whether it's through peer reviews, whether it's through observation of practice. Sharing around teacher development in particular, I think, is something that we are very excited about. When our school was created, it was very clearly created with a dual mandate. One mandate was to become a very good school. So Kgosi himself went to Hilton. I told you yesterday about his brother who said he needed to turn the buses around from those who are going to Rustenburg. But then Kgosi Leroux, his parents sent him to Hilton College, and he sort of said, well, why should a child in Bafokeng not have the option of a Hilton College? And so this campus, whilst it's built and it's beautiful and it's large, he celebrates the fact that the Bafokeng Nation have very large dreams. And this is a symbol of that. Also, it's a symbol of the investment that this community is willing to make in children and in education. And where I think we have come to understand Lebone in the coalition as well is we have 50% of our students don't pay the school fees. Yeah, they pay some aspect of it, some portion of it. 50% pay the full school fee, and the full school fee is a pretty decent amount of money that you have to pay. So it's a proper private school in that regard. So it's an interesting world that we are in, and I often speak to the staff about having to be comfortable with the discomfort of working between two worlds. But yet, we find ourselves positioned in a way that sort of suggests to me that I come to coalition meetings and I leave absolutely inspired by the work that people are doing, and I know that we are all pushing those children up that very steep slope to get great results. But then the next day I might be at a meeting in Johannesburg with the heads of all the census and everything else. And then I find myself between these two things, and the two conversations are so different. So I guess that Lebone finds itself interestingly placed in the fact that we are between at times. And I think that what I've realized is they don't have to be exclusively different, those things. Ultimately, what it's really about in the conversations that blend those two worlds together for me in the meeting is, how do children learn better? How does the experience of school make children richer? How do we prepare young people to be the adults that we spoke about so much yesterday, ultimately? And I think it's really important that those two worlds continue to not be exclusive. And I find that that's a role that I can play and that the school can play. Instead of saying it doesn't have to be. Equally, what's important is the realization of working with children from those different worlds. The socialization that takes place without us having to be deliberate about it at all. Young people who understand what's important and don't hold anything against one another. So the point is that those young people live together and learn together without baggage, because they just get on with what's important, which is learning. I've come to realize that more and more as a real privilege of working in the school. And our leadership festival that Tebe will share about shortly is our goal there is very clear. Half of the students come from schools that we would all consider very humble, schools that struggle with resources, and half of the students, or just about half of them, come from schools where they have a very different experience of the world. but yet the conversations that take place don't reflect that at all. In fact, they reflect young people who have a very clear, passionate understanding of what South Africa needs to be, and they are hell-bent to get there. And so I think as I share about our school today, that's probably the message that I'm taking more and more, is that we are not by choice, not by design initially, but we have found ourselves interestingly placed, bridging between two worlds, and finding that bridge, that space in the middle is actually wonderful, and rich, and that many people want to be in that space. The things that we are proud of, so our teacher development program is taking shape, and we, back to us explaining about the second part of our mandate. The second part of our mandate is to influence education in this community, and then we've obviously taken it over the 8 years to influencing education more broadly. And one of those ways is what a lot of us are doing is how do we prepare teachers? And so when the school was created, it was very clearly established to be a teacher training center, I guess. So we sort of refer to it as a teacher training center now, and we are exploring what that looks like and what it means together with the Royal Bafokeng Institute. We've been, there's some interesting countries that are doing some interesting work around that. In the schools in Finland in particular, I believe there are 12 teacher training schools or centers in Finland that are doing some amazing work in terms of how they prepare teachers for the world of teaching. So that's another aspect that we're very proud of. I think our Leadership Festival we're very proud of. Also just interesting to share in terms of practice, we in grade 10 and 11 have, through experience of the International Baccalaureate, we teach a program called Theory of Knowledge, which Hannah sort of through the life orientation program is taught. And I've had the privilege of teaching ethics for the first half of this year to grade 11s. And the experience of teaching in that format where there's no exam, the students are merely asked to write and to discuss, and we get into dialogue, conversation regularly. And yesterday, as I was listening, there was a lot of talk about civic leadership and how do we make sure that young people are not only at school to learn subject, but they're growing as human beings. So if I had to share that with you, I'd encourage you to explore something like that in your school. For me, working with grade 11s and talking about moral dilemmas and how they respond to it, and seeing how they change their mind over 6 months as they start to read and understand and discuss.